But we will begin tonight with some exclusive breaking news about if we don't get health reform, why we won't get it. If we don't get the public option, why we won't get it. We've reported on this show that Senator Joe Lieberman of Connecticut has put himself out there as the lone Democrat willing to filibuster a vote on health reform along with Republicans. As of yesterday, it appeared that Senator Lieberman had company. Speaking with CBS yesterday, Democratic Senator Evan Bayh of Indiana threatened to not only join Mr. Lieberman's filibuster threat, but to take it one step further, suggesting that he would be willing to filibuster to even block debate on a health reform bill that he didn't like.
Some people argue that we should vote to go forward on a bill even if we don't like it, but, as we get further along in this, I view procedure and substance as being largely one and the same. If there are things that are in the bill that I think are just beyond the pale, for example, that would really explode the deficit in the out years or would dramatically increase the premiums that ordinary families are paying, I just don't think that's even worth starting a discussion on.
That remark has been interpreted, not only here but everywhere, as an indication that Senator Bayh planned to filibuster even debate on health reform. Republicans on Capitol Hill sent around his remarks as soon as he made them because it seemed to be in line with their strategy that a vote no on health care was the same as voting to filibuster health care. Even as Joe Lieberman promised to stand with Republicans to block the vote on health reform in the end, at least Lieberman was pledging to allow the bill to come to the floor for an initial vote. Bayh's statement on CBS yesterday indicated that he wouldn't even allow that. Well, today, Senator Bayh's office issued an about-face on that issue, releasing a statement that reads, quote, Senator Bayh will support moving forward to a health care debate on the Senate floor, where he will work hard to address his concerns and craft affordable legislation that reduces the deficit and lowers health care costs for Indiana families and small businesses. In other words, according to his office's statement today, Senator Bayh is now promising to allow the bill to come to the floor. But would he still, like Lieberman, filibuster the final vote with Republicans? Would he block a majority vote on the final bill and force his party to get 60 votes to pass health reform instead of 50? Well, exclusively this afternoon, Senator Bayh told us this. He told us that his position on health reform is not the same as Senator Lieberman's. Senator Bayh told us it is extraordinarily unlikely that he would filibuster health reform. He said there is nothing in the bill he is aware of now that would cause him to vote to filibuster, and he said that he currently, quote, can't think of a set of circumstances under which he would vote against cloture. What does this mean? It means that it's been a very big 24 hours for health reform. Senator Bayh's statements as of 24 hours ago indicated that he had walked through the door that Joe Lieberman had opened, that he was willing to go even further than Joe Lieberman, not only willing to filibuster the final vote on health reform, but to filibuster any debate as well. Both of those perceived threats from Senator Evan Bayh of Indiana have now been walked way back, which means that Joe Lieberman stands alone. Joe Lonely. Questions remain about commitments not yet made by some other conservative senators, but probably the most substantive issues about health reform depend on whether it will take 50 votes to pass them or 60. And right now, Republicans' only hope to make it 60 are that a Democrat will side with them to filibuster. And right now, Joe Lieberman is their only stated hope for that. Joe Lieberman opened the door to that this week, and no one else is yet walking through that door to join him. Senator Bayh's office says today's turn of events is a clarification of the senator's position. It, of course, goes without saying that Senator Bayh does have a big political liability on this issue in that his wife, as we discussed on the show last night, sits on the board of directors of a handful of companies that would be directly affected by health reform. Senator Bayh's wife, Susan, is on the board of the health insurance giant WellPoint. WellPoint's the nation's largest commercial health insurer. Susan Bayh also sits on the board of directors of a handful of pharmaceutical corporations, including companies Dendreon, Curis, and Dyax. Senator Bayh's office told us explicitly today that Susan Bayh's activities have no impact whatsoever on Senator Bayh's legislative actions. They said, quote, neither Mrs. Bayh nor any employee or lobbyist for WellPoint can lobby Senator Bayh or any member of his staff. Our strict ethics policy goes above and beyond what is required under Senate ethics rules. What's clear tonight is that Senator Bayh is making clear that he should not be seen as an obstacle to the Democratic Party's attempt to get a vote on health reform. The same cannot be said for Joe Lieberman, who tonight reaffirmed his commitment to filibuster any health reform bill that includes any form of the public option.
You're saying that you would actually join in a Republican filibuster against the entire health care bill if this is included?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I will join a filibuster. Now, whether it happens to be Republican or not, that depends on other people's decisions.
Whether the filibuster is Republican or not depends on other people's decisions, he said, namely other Democrats' decisions. Now that Senator Evan Bayh has essentially counted himself out of filibustering with Republicans, there is still only one Democrat or one member of Congress who caucuses with the Democrats who is on the record as willing to blow up health reform, and that is Joseph Isidore Lieberman. Joe Lieberman opened the door on this earlier in the week. Evan Bayh walked through that door very briefly, but he has now returned. Democrats only need 50 votes to pass health reform if they can get Lieberman himself to walk back through that door that he opened. Can they? Joining us now once again is Jane Hampshire. She's founder and publisher of the progressive blog Fire Dog Lake. It's fair to say I think she's been the online activist-in-chief for health reform. Jane, it's good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here, Rachel.
What's your reaction to this news from Senator Bayh tonight, that he is apparently not planning to filibuster the health reform bill? He can't imagine any circumstances under which he would.
Well, I think it's a mistake to think of the Senate as an august body, possibly the most powerful deliberative body in the world, and instead think of us as it being in day 4 of a beauty pageant. Day 1, Harry Reid brings the public options. He's going to bring the public option to the floor. Everyone's just happy to be there. Day 2, Miss Connecticut doesn't think anybody's paying enough attention to her, so she whips her top off by the pool in front of the judges. Day 3, Chris Dodd's going to run for Miss Congeniality. He sticks up for Miss Connecticut. Evan Bayh's worried he's not going to get enough attention. He thinks maybe taking his top off is a good idea. And on day 4, here we have Tom Harkin and Conrad shooting them looks and saying, you know, we've had quite enough of this. Everybody keep their tops on. So today they came out and they said, you know, we think that Joe ought to think very seriously about whether he really wants to do something like this. And that doesn't sound like a lot to us, but the Senate doesn't think of themselves as a beauty pageant. They think of themselves more in Queen Victoria terms, in we are not amused. So I think Evan Bayh dialing it back today had a lot to do with the response that he got from his Senate colleagues.
That is, first of all, that metaphor is so disturbing and so spectacular at the same time. I just have to hand it to you. The image of Joe Lieberman sans bikini top is now seared into my mind like a brand on a cow.
Sorry to do that to you.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll never get that moment back. But in your metaphor, I mean, Joe Lieberman is still topless. And unfortunately, he still is. And so I think you're right to point out that other senators sort of gently expressing their disapproval of his proverbial toplessness at this point is a bigger deal than it would be in the real world, that their words do actually sort of calibrate differently. But what leverage can they really bring to bear on him in order to get him to get in line?
Well, as you say, there are people who do have influence over Joe Lieberman. Joe has his committee chairmanship of the Homeland Security Committee. That's his power base in the Senate. He's a very vain man, and were that to be stripped from him, he would be like Rumpelstiltskin putting his foot through the floor. And the Democrats have the power to do that. So, again, the Harkin, Conrad comments today were to the effect of, you know, let's remember you're here at our good graces, Joe. But, you know, he also needs the sub base at Groton, which is the submarine version of the F-22, in order to stay in the good graces of Connecticut citizens while he does stuff like this. And that's something that could, you know, potentially go as well. So there are levers that people in the Senate and the president can use to kind of rein Joe in. I think everybody's just sort of saying, this is what Joe does. We're going to let him run around with his top off for a little while, and eventually, well, I'll just suck it up and tell him to put back on, and hopefully Joe will put the shirt back on.
Now that Evan Bayh seems to be sort of off the table in terms of joining a Republican filibuster, now that he seems to be proverbially fully clothed again, what other Democrats are out there who haven't committed to staying in line on the procedural votes? I know that at Fire Dog Lake, that's one of the things that you guys have been really eyeballing.
Well, I was over here the other night, and I said I didn't think Blanche Lincoln would, and I don't think she would. She's too vulnerable in her state, and that kind of a move would draw primary challengers for her. You know, Ben Nelson we haven't heard from. He is usually, you know, he's probably the shoe that's waiting to drop, that has made noises about the public option before, and he has much less to fear than Blanche Lincoln does. So I think that he's another one that people sort of want to, you know, know where Ben stands.
Jane Hamsher, founder and publisher of Fire Dog Lake. If he calls me, I'll let you know what he says. Thanks for your time tonight, Jane.
Thanks.